Good evening once again. So in a minute, we're going to start with a talk. So I'm going to invite our guests to discuss about this anniversary of the 100 years of women's right to vote. So I'm going to call Denise van der Cruz. Have a seat. Then I'm going to call Amani. Please, Gerd Valchar. And our host, Tim Vos. Okay, so I will ask you to introduce yourself. Denise, can you say a few words about you?
Sure. Sit on. Hi. It's okay? Hi, I'm Denise van der Cruz. I've been living in Austria for about 5 years. I'm from the United States. What do I do? So I started an organization here that's a social group for Black people in Vienna called Black People in Vienna. And I also organize a lot around issues around queer rights and around women's rights.
Yes, thank you. Amani, can you say a few words about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Amania Buzahlan. I was born in Austria. I've studied philosophy and intercultural studies, so that's what I used to teach at the university college to try to change the mind of students who are becoming teachers. How do we think and work with diversity in the classroom in schools? And my book is published about Muslim women. It's about Muslim women speak for themselves and to show and different stories and who are those women, to gain some different perspectives on that topic.
Then, Gers, can you say some words about you?
Good evening from my side. My name is Gerd Falchers. I'm a political scientist. I'm teaching at different universities, at the University of Vienna or the University of Klagenfurt. And my main focus for already several years is the issue of citizenship on the one side and voting rights on the other side, and the connection of those two. And the question, is it necessary that only citizens are or do have the right to vote or to run as a candidate?
Okay. Tim, can you say a few words about you?
Yes, heartily welcome from my side. I'm Tim Voss. I'm the director or artistic director of this space, Künstlerhaus. I'm responsible for the program, and so this is the first one, Haben und Brauchen in Wien. And one of the issues we are constantly working with is circumstances of production, also by female artists. And there I see my contribution here. Thank you.
Tim, I will start with you. We've just heard...
Where are you? I don't see you. I mean,
I'm here.
There you are. It's really strange for me.
The public.
Okay.
But you can hear my voice.
Stage
Can you?
right. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Please.
Then you lost me. Well, we've just heard some nice music by a woman composer. And you are responsible for the programmation of this institution. What is the part of the woman in your programmation? And is it an issue?
Well, let's say, of course we try to, let's speak about the Künstlerhaus. The Künstlerhaus is a kind of society which is founded in the 18th century. And it was mainly, no, it was first until the 60s run by men. This means women were just not allowed, female artists were just not allowed to be members of this society. So you can imagine, this is, I mean, into the end of the 60s, okay? We're not speaking about something like 1960s. So this is somehow to speak about the society already. And for me at the moment, it's one of the main focuses that, for instance, we still have a problem that for instance, I'm directing an art space, but I'm an artist by education. My partner, she's a female artist as well. We both have a little one together, and we try to share the thing, and we completely have this situation here in Vienna, even more than in Berlin, where we're coming from, that women especially have sometimes the choice of being an artist, professional artist, or a mother. Here it's a question of being a female artist or a mother. It becomes more and more because, why? For instance, residencies by not like a small society or something, but by the Bund, are only accessible for women which don't have kids. To have kids is a kind of restriction. You cannot take over and also that they just say, I mean, we speak about 60 residencies, international residencies by the state, right? And still it's not possible to come there with children. So this is, for instance, one. Another one is that we know that female artists work on both sides. They have this kind of thing that they not just on a free market as such, like vogelfrei, but also have to take care about this role of mothership. And when I'm sitting here, I don't feel like I could represent a female artist at all, but from my interest as a male director, I just want to have her doing her thing. So her interest is my interest, and I take care about that. This is mainly it. So this is a little bit a problem of sitting on a panel like this, that I don't want to represent at all female artists here, right? But it's my interest again.
Thank you, Tim. I'm sure that people in the public have questions to ask you, but I will give you the mic about later when we do our second part of the debate. At the end, everyone will be able to ask questions to our panel. So when I listen to you, Tim, I think about how women are being treated, and when we talk about women, and it's always like we are talking about the minority. Most of the vocabulary we use when we talk about women in our society and how we have to integrate them, and all the problems they are facing are the same kind of problem the minority is facing. So, Amani, can I ask you, why is this part of the society, which is a majority, representing 52% of the humanity, is treated like a minority?
That's quite a big one. I think, mainly, I mean, women are not the minority, but it's like considered as a minority in politics and the way we discuss issues concerning women. And I think trying to break it down, it's like, it's about fear. People are afraid to lose power. It's about patriarchy. Is that the way to pronounce it in English? Patriarchat? Yeah, okay. And I think it's not just about men, it's also about a system of power. And if you want to change it, it means that some people have to change themselves, some have to change the system, and it's also manifested in the language, as we have heard about that earlier from the first woman who was speaking. And it's also about changing salaries, because women still earn less than men, even if you're talking about countries which consider themselves so enlightened and so progressive, in Austria, for example. So there are many issues to change concerning that one. And I think another issue is that thinking about why are women considered as a minority is also about the topic that there are women who are not supporting the issue of changing the system, of changing the power relations and gaining access. Because considering the history of vote, to get access to vote, there have been many women resisting against it. No, we don't want a change, we don't want to vote. And until now there are women who are trying to not support change. And I think it's in the system of patriarchy to divide and to rule and to spread like fear of change. So it's like quite a big issue. And I mean, considering Austria, the government, for example, if we are talking about change, nowadays we have the feeling of we are going backwards and not towards progress, because the government is cutting the fundings for women organization, for Frauenhäuser, for example, and other issues which are helping women. And so it's also a real struggle within our politics. And looking deeper into that, it's also trying to portray it as we are helping women, we are helping girls. The government is not helping them, but trying to sell it as we are helping. For example, the hijab ban, which passed the kindergarten and Volksschule, primary school, it was under the label, we are helping girls, Muslim girls. But asking Muslim people, no, you're not helping us. Actually, you're discriminating us. So it's like the question is a big one, and I'm going to stop here. Yeah.
Thank you, Amani. But when you say that women are divided about this issue of voting, for instance, this leads to another question. When women represent 52% of the humanity, why can't you all be together and make changes? Denise, you've created this Black Society organization, association, and so you have this idea of how you can regroup people around a culture, around an idea. Can I ask you why women can't or are not able to be mobilized to create a real changes about their own situation in the society?
Well, I think, the issue's in the question, right? Women are not a monolith. Women are not like all of the same, and they don't all have the same issues. Women are as varied as all human beings are varied. You have women with citizenship, you have women without, you have women with disabilities, you have trans women, you have women that are considered mainstream, you have class issues, and people tend to organize around the issues that they feel most familiar with, and gender is not always that thing that people feel most familiar with. Even though it is one of the things that defines so much of the reality of our lives. So it's not so much that women haven't gotten together to organize around those issues, it's that women in general have varying issues. And one of the things that has been really hard, not just for women, but for all of humanity to understand is that when you're in any group, the group is only going to be as strong as the most vulnerable member of that group. So what that means is that if you're in a group and you have someone who is extra vulnerable for whatever reason, if you can make sure to focus attention on them and make sure that they can get rights, then the entire group will have rights. That's been a really hard thing for people to understand, especially with regards to social struggles, right? And so many compromises end up getting made within social struggles that cut off the most vulnerable members of those struggles. And there's so many examples that I could give of that. And that happens time and time again within the women's movement.
Thank you, Denise. Then, if the women are of different, they have different issues, is their vote of the same color? I mean, do they tend to vote to the left, to the right? This is a question, obviously, for you, Gers.
Yeah, for Austria, and historically, you can say that women traditionally voted more conservative. Yeah, which even surprised the Social Democrats, because the socialists, they were ones who fought for the right to vote for women, and of course they expected to get those women vote. But like the first elections in the First Republic and also in the Second Republic, women tended to vote more for the conservatives, more for the right than to the left. It changed, so in the 1970s, when the Social Democrats made huge changes in society, the abortion issue was one of the crucial issues back then, discussions about the legality, about the right or to have it legal to have an abortion. And this kind of is one theory and one point in time when it changed and when the majority of the women started to vote for the left parties more than for the right. And this is a pattern you can see in Austria, at least, and mostly in Europe today as well. Populist, far-right, nationalist parties nowadays used to have far more votes of men than of women.
Then a question for the two women we have on the panel. Would you vote for a woman for just for the fact that she's a woman?
That's the whole question?
That's the whole question, yeah.
No. I think one of the things that identity politics has taught us is that just because someone might share an identity does not mean that they share your politics. So someone may have a certain identity, and it might actually act as cover for some really horrible politics. Who said that? Who? I knew you would say.
Oh, okay, Amani?
Yeah, I think it's. I would agree on that, on that one, and I think it's really important to understand the people who are supporting you in your cause and who you can support too, and to get to know each other. Because sometimes just because you are a woman, there are women who are supporting discrimination because of your sexuality, because of your religion, because of your ethnicity. So it depends. It's not just because being a woman, having your blind support, and that's it. So.
Thank you. I think that we can take one or two questions from the public. If anyone wants to ask, I have one question there. Okay, moment.
Thank you. It's quite a delicate question, I have to admit. Did you hear? You surely heard about what happened a few days ago in Iran, that women did take off their voile, and they were like waving with it, like on the streets. And I actually never really got it, you know, like the difference. Maybe you could explain this to me. The difference between like that this is for that you show to people that you are believing in God, or sometimes it's mixing up with my inner mind so much if this is a something that men put on women to oppress them or to make the patriarchat stable. You know, I would like to understand this like once for real, you know, like because this is mixing up those two things always, and nobody really ever talks about it, you know, and I'm like, fuck, I'm not getting it, you know, I'm not getting it, you know.
I guess that's your question is directed to Hamani.
So, in all respect, but I think that's, to me, it feels like it's the only topic we talk about. It's like, I mean, I've studied philosophy, for example, and usually people tend to ask me about why in Iran, why in Saudi Arabia, why in Pakistan, why, I don't know where, why the hijab, why not? Even if you're not wearing hijab, it's like, why don't you wear it? Why do other people, your other sisters wear it? So it's always reducing Muslim women on this only topic. And it's really tiring. It's like, again. So, I mean, there are many people who would disagree on that. It's like, no, that's usually the only thing we talk about. Even if you look into politics and media, newspapers are full of it. It's not the perspective of Muslim women and women coming from different countries. But, yeah, I don't know what else to say. And just because you've brought up Iran, women are fighting to be free to choose what they want to wear, or to take it off, put it on, and I think that's really important to also support this, to be against oppression in any kind of form. I mean, if women want to wear it and the government says no, that's a form of oppression. If women they don't want to wear it, like in Iran, and they have to, that's also another form of oppression. So it's really important to stand up against oppression. But it's not my place to, I don't want to be in the place to keep explaining my lifestyle, explaining my religion, explaining my hijab, because if you ask another one, she will tell you another story, another argument, and it's like really, I don't know, frustrating. It's like reducing Muslim women and their potential and their capacities of doing different stuff, talking about different issues, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Maybe to add something to it, I'm wearing a cap since quite a while, right? And the problem is that I really want to get rid of this cap. But if I take off the cap, I have to continue talking about why I'm not having a cap right now. So it doesn't change anything at all. So, yeah. My solidarity then.
Another question? Yes. It's the last one for the moment.
Yeah, my question would be, or I would like the four people on the Bühne to maybe say something to intersectionality, because I think this is very important, and I think it will also help our lady that just asked the question before to adapt better to the fight, to the global fight against racism, sexism, and all those isms. So what is your take on intersectionality? Thank you.
Want to answer first?
Me. Well, intersectionality, I'm sure people are familiar with it, is a term that's coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And basically it means that it comes back to this idea of not being a monolith, but that we come with this sort of specificity of oppression, right? So there's not only my status as a woman, there's also my status as a queer person, there's my status as a black woman, there's my status as a foreigner, right? There's my status as a non-German speaker, whatever those may be, and those are layered. And depending on my reality at that moment, how oppression comes to me is going to have one of those things, or all of those things, or some of those things will come to the forefront of how I'm oppressed. So if someone makes a judgment about how I'm dressed based on Western standards of dressing, then that has to do with me not appearing as Western, coming to the forefront in that moment, for example. I'm just a definition person. What do you think about it?
Yeah, and it kind of also explains one of your questions before. Why is there a majority of 52% women and they don't feel themselves to be in power? Because they are split into different other axes of discrimination, like ability, disability, you mentioned it, like migration, non-migration issues, like sex and gender, etc., etc. And there was this story when the idea or the concept of intersectionality was kind of born. There was, and so I can continue with the definition part, so to say. There was a company in the United States, and there was an issue on black women, and they felt discriminated against. And then the company said, wait, what are you discriminated against? As a woman, but we have gender equal policy, and there is a program, and it's all in place. And they said, yes, that's true. Are you discriminated against as a people of color? And say, wait. We have an anti-discrimination and anti-racism program here, and everything is good and everything is fine. And it was okay. But still, it was not the intersectionality between race, so to say, and gender mentioned here. So there was a program against racism and there was a program against gender discrimination, but there was no program for the intersectionality of those two axes of discrimination.
I would also add to that that it's important to understand it because it sheds light on the issue that all oppression is connected, as we know, and it is not a single issue. And that opens the space to come together in solidarity, to support each other if you are attacked by discrimination, if you are, I don't know the English word. Yeah. Yes, attacked. Yeah, okay.
From an artistic side, I can also add to it that, as an exhibition maker or working with artists, it's always all kinds of representation are the enemies, right? So in case, for instance, we even try to see things like not kind of just gender issues or just, let's say, because we could describe the arts as a kind of laboratory of trying to get rid of certain notions, and there we can, for instance, we see the xenofeminists, for instance, who try not to, they say, I rather prefer to be a thing than an object, and work on a kind of transformance into the object, so not to make a difference anymore between an object and a human being, so to speak, just as a kind of tryout, if we can free ourselves from these kinds of representation, including also gender issues and all kinds. So this is really the thing we are busy with right now, right?
And
yes?
Yeah, and just another example, because it just came to my mind, for intersectionality on the Austrian law, actually. We are talking about the right to vote for women, and we could all agree, okay, there is now a right for women to vote in Austria. So does it mean that every woman has the right to vote in Austria? No. So, okay, there is the issue of citizenship. So who has no citizenship has not the right to vote. Okay, but this is true for men and women as well. Yes, but now let's look into the Citizenship Act, the Nationality Act. How can you actually...
Yes, I think that is...
Let me make the point.
Yeah,
no?
it's a good point. It's a good point.
But do you know it?
Yeah, but it is so good that I think that it deserves more time, and it's going to be the point we're going to discuss after the break. Because it's such a good point that we need to take time to discuss about it. That's my name, indeed. We make a pause now, and this is a subject I reserved for the next topic. And that's why I cut you there. Thank you. Thank you all. And we'll be back in a minute for a stage performance by Eric Abugoa.
Going through, going around, and I was seeing that bird in a puddle, just trying to get through, Nobody was noticing, but I was noticing the bird. I was noticing the fire. I was noticing the bird. I was noticing the fire growing on the bird, but nobody was seeing it. But I was seeing it. I remember that bird going through, like, what the fuck you gonna do? Now that I'm wearing it, all those colors, all those alignments, all those imprisonment, now that I got it inside of me. There's a prison I remember you shutting me up. I remember you shutting us up. I remember the alignment, but I do remember the bird trying to get through. You see the problem when you don't get through the mud and the water. You see the problem when you don't get through the mud and the water. You don't hear the beating. You should hear. It goes. Somewhere deep inside, you can try to rearrange. You can try to flex. Motion me.
1 out of every 5 women will be sexually
You can try to tell me
before she reaches the age of 18.
that my laces don't add up,
On this day,
but I'm still the bird in the water. I'm still the bird in the water, and for hundreds of birds inside the social water that we're into, we're still mopping it. And we're still maintaining on the hard water and the soil. Because what you don't know is that at the beginning of the walk inside of muddy water, we got fire.
So, indeed, when we talk about the most discriminalized group, women can win by our own hand. But it can be harder when a woman is also from a migrant background or when she is disabled. So there will be, it will be even harder. So the question is, are women from migrant background more engaged in politics? And if so, if they are or they have the right to vote when they don't have the citizenship, can it make a change of how women are in this society? When we finished the first part of the talk, Gers was starting to talk about the intersection about being a woman and also being from a migrant background, if I recall correctly. Can you carry on this point?
Yep, I'll try to. What I actually tried to say was because there was the question of intersectionality between migration and gender. And like I started, like there is a right to vote for women. So does it mean that every woman has the right to vote? Actually, no, because there are migrant women who don't have citizenship, so therefore they don't have the right to vote. But one could argue, but this is true for men as well. If they don't have the citizenship, for instance, of Austria, and they live in Austria, they don't have the right to vote either. But when you look into the nationality law and you see the conditions you have to fulfill to gain the Austrian citizenship, then you see that there is the need for a minimum income. And we all know there is a gender pay gap in Austria, so it is easier for men to earn the amount of money than for women that is needed. So it is easier for men to gain Austrian citizenship than for women, so it is easier for men to gain the voting right in Austria compared to women. So is there an equal right to vote for women in Austria? The answer is no. Because there is kind of the hidden law that you cannot see when you just look at it, because it's gender equal. Men and women have the right to vote when they are Austrian citizens, and if they're not, they don't have the right to vote. But considering gender pay gap, there is a huge difference. That was the point I actually tried to make, and it's a very good example for intersectionality and discrimination based on intersectionality. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tim. The idea of thank you. Sorry, Gers. The idea of voting is when you have the right to vote, you participate. You can participate of how things can be changed. The other question was, if we give the right to vote, not based on citizenship, but even if you don't have the citizenship of one country, then you can vote. Will it make a change for the woman? Will the woman from migrant background, the way they're going to vote, can it result to a change in how women are treated in this society?
Well, I think it's a necessary condition, but not necessarily the solution for everything. I mean, Austrian women have the right to vote, but it doesn't mean that they are equal in society. No, of course not. But there is some idea that in democracy, people who are like part of the polity should have the right to vote. So then it means that everyone should have the same right to vote who is like present in the country, in the town where one lives. And when you are living here for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then you are present, you are affected by the laws that are enacted in parliament or in the town hall or on the provincial level, and you should have the right to participate in those decisions. But it of course doesn't mean that all solutions are or problems are solved. Not in any case, because we also have like discrimination based on income. Like there are workers that are discriminated against, women as well, etc., etc. They all have the right to vote, but it doesn't mean that they have the same power in society.
Okay, thanks. Then the question will be, if it is not only the fact that we can vote, that can make a change, so it has to be a change in the society. I've seen, you must have heard of it, about Lori Lightfoot. who is the mayor of the new mayor of Chicago. She's a black and gay mayor. She's been elected. Is it a coincidence, Denise, or is there something? Is there a deep change in the American society that can explain that a woman like Lori Lightfoot can be as the mayor of a big city like Chicago?
I think in terms of representation, people are much more accepting of seeing people that are not white, cis, male in positions of power in America. That doesn't necessarily mean that that changes the political reality of what those people are putting forth. So one of the most, I always try to remind people that one of the most, the highest in our recent history, sort of like barriers that was broken was Clarence Thomas, right? So he's a black man. He was put on the Supreme Court. He was a long shot away from Thurgood Marshall, and he will block anything progressive coming through. He's the most conservative justice on the Supreme Court right now. So him being a black man does not preclude him being really a horrible political decision for black people, which was what was intended. And his blackness was intended as cover for his political decisions. So while I think that it's nice to see that gay people can be elected and black people can be elected, Lori Lightfoot just came out in pictures with Ivanka Trump, right? So she was in the White House fraternizing with this administration. And I think that we're all familiar with the Trump administration, right? So, and how horrendous they have been for gay people, trans people specifically, and black people as well. So, yeah, it doesn't really, it doesn't change the cost of bread, so as they say.
The thing is, for the moment, we are, as a democracy, one of the things that can make things change is how we, the people who put in place in power, and it goes through the vote. But we realize these last few years in Europe, for instance, that the number of voters are decreasing, and we are celebrating the fact that 100 years ago the women have the right to vote, but when we look at how people are using this right to vote, it's always decreasing, and in particular in one of my country, which is France, people are voting less and less. What can we do to have people, the one who have the right to vote, voting more and more wisely? This question goes to anyone who wants to answer it.
Should I? Or do you want to? No, I think it's important to people to educate them. What does it mean? What does politics do for your life, and what does it change if you are being engaged? And I think it also comes to the situation what you were talking about, being engaging people from minorities and with a migrant background, because usually if you see politicians who look like you, who talk like you, who have the names like you, sometimes people may be more engaged in it and have the feeling of, okay, my vote and my engagement, it counts. Because there are many stories in Austria where people, for example, there was one Muslim woman in Upper Austria, I think it was in Wels, and she was trying to, for ÖVP, I mean, okay, that's a discussion for itself, why ÖVP, but she wanted to try to be in this party, and at the ÖVP they even were putting big images with her name and her face, of course, and she was wearing hijab. and so many people were, there was a big, huge shitstorm, yes, against her. And the party said, oh, okay, we are sorry, we can't push you forward. And even herself, she said, I can do this to me, to myself, to my family. I don't want to be in this kind of politics. And I think if we are talking about how do we engage people, how do we make politics more attractive to people, it's also about the question about how open are we as a society? How interested are we as a society to see politics represented as the society as we are? Because if we start like, oh, we are so diverse and we are so interested in people voting for our party and for this and that, but when it comes to people from minorities and really interested in, okay, I want to share, I want to have a certain position as a politician, I want to start a career as a politician, and they are not being supported, and we can talk about all the parties, and there are many stories. I think it's also a discussion we have to have on this, how open are the different parties, how open and how interested are they, and what kind of language do they speak? Are they just interested in the whole society when there is a big Wahl coming up? Or is it like consistent work with the communities? Yeah.
So I have an unpopular, I think, opinion about this, and I think it's that right now, especially with the declining amount of engaged voters, I think what we're seeing is sort of the cracks in democracy. And democracy was pushed all around the world as part of this like colonial Western project as somewhat of a cure-all and the only moral way to engage politically. And it's not true. And I think we're starting to see that it's not true, and that democracy can have as many cracks as any of the vilified sort of like political, other political experiments that have cropped up around the world. And one of the cracks that we have in democracy is through their results. You know, it's brought us Trump, it's brought us Bolsonaro in Brazil, it's brought us Brexit in Britain, right? We got the FPO here, we got a lot of things here that democracy has brought up. But democracy is supposed to be this most moral way to politically engage people, and we know, and I think now en masse, people are starting to see that that's not true. And so they're disillusioned by that. And there really hasn't been a way for them to sort of like criticize democracy without criticizing political engagement in and of itself. I think that that is part of the problem, is that we have conflated all political engagement and political progress with a mandatory engagement in democracy. And that is not how actually most political movements have gone forward, you know?
But maybe if I can add another point, I think it's also quite interesting that if we're talking about democracy and changes, it's also about manipulation. Because we've had this huge discussion about the voters who are voting for Trump and how they used Facebook for it. And I mean, there are also people interested in trying to gain attention through Facebook. And even if we look at FPÖ in Austria, what kind of media they use and how they are investing so much money in floating all the houses with their leaflets and etc., and even using YouTube and I don't know what. So I think it's also very important to discuss about how do we spread different informations about democracy and how do we use it. And there are people interested in, I don't know if I can use the word manipulation, but I think there were people interested in leading the way to a certain party, because just a little example, there has been a quite interesting study or investigation about Meghan Markle, the wife of Harry, Prince Harry, and they were showing that there are so many haters online towards her, and there has been a little investigation about how many accounts are showing hate toward her, and it was like, I don't know, maybe 17 accounts, and they've been like tweeting and posting thousands of comments against her. And that's quite interesting that in terms of democracy, when it comes to a huge and important vote by, usually there are many accounts becoming quite active for FPÖ, quite active for Trump, for example. So this is another point I think it's interesting to think about and to discuss it. Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I just wonder, because I see mainly all the notions you both are also raising. For me, there's a crisis about the notions at all, right? We have a kind of all institutions, not just the politics, but also in the cultural sphere, run this certain crisis of representing something they are not able to anymore. They are questioned from all kinds. We are not sure about the argumentation of the left. We are not sure about the argumentation of the right. If we speak about political theory, we need to go into art bookshops to buy these books, right? We don't have a kind of, not at all, any kind of group gatherings where we discuss how we really want to live together. Everything is individualized into, and this is also, for instance, I always misunderstood the whole gender issue, for instance, when we talk, and things are so easy to make them emancipatory, but they are also running a certain neoliberalistic wave, right? Of you can be what you want, you can change whatever you want to be, you can change your gender, you can change everything, it's all up on you, and if you fail, you're also responsible about that. So we are not sure about what is really emancipatory, what is progressive, what is regressive, what institutions really do. A woman not necessarily, of course, does not necessarily speak better about other women than several men, of course. Yeah? Remember Margaret Thatcher. I mean, it's like, so what we first need is something like, I would consider, and this is also, sorry for this, bringing this project here up, is to a kind of gathering in really small circles, and then just to also question certain agreements which are easily being made because we are so okay, and you're okay, and me okay. We are all, everything is getting more and more okayer. And I think we really need to speak about more personal and make, and yeah, this is what I want to call it, yeah. In small circles, and just talk about building up new ideologies is something we need to do. Or Chantal Mouffe says that we really need antagonism. We don't need to have this kind of, that everything is okay. We need things like where we really are able to learn and to bridge democracy as such. Yeah.
Thank you. Then I will pass the microphone to you and see if any one of you have a question to ask to the panel. Oh, you all look so. It was so profound.
Turn around.
Where? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure what your name is, but you were talking about democracy. I mean, you were speaking against democracy. So, what alternative would you suggest?
You know, I think that kind of that ship is out of the port, so to speak. What I mean by that is that all other kind of forms of political existence have been so virulently attacked and are seen as reasons for us to invade countries and destabilize regions, unless, of course, they have a lot of money like Saudi Arabia, right? And then it's okay. So, I mean, I had a friend who's a law professor, and she was going to Cuba, she was going to all of these countries that were non-democratic countries, and I asked her, well, what are you doing? And she told me she was basically making the case that political diversity of systems is as important as ecological diversity. Like, we would never say, like, let's just kill all cats and it'll be fine, you know? So there's this idea that if we don't have political diversity, and so we don't have other models and ways of doing things, that we become mentally so blocked in on this one model, and then we don't even think of ways of how we can critique it. Someone outside of democracy has a way better critique of democracy than I do. That's just how that works. You know, the person that's outside of it is seeing things that we can't see from within it. So, of course, you know, my imagination has been blocked by, you know, every country that I have been a democratic country, right? I was born in a former colony, right? And then as soon as that former colony decided to get its own independence away from Britain, right? What happens then? You have this new form of colonization that strips it of all of its native wealth, right? So at the end of the day, democracy is not necessarily the most moral thing. That's all I'm saying, putting it out there as an idea. And I think that there's a cognitive dissonance when we operate within that model as if it is the only model and the only true and right way that we can politically engage.
We have another question?
No, I just want to say that actually what Denise said now was very, very clear. What I want to say that democracy was built behind of the idea of dehumanization. And actually, if you talk about citizenship and rights, you know, you have to talk about the concept of humanity. Who is being seen as human beings, you know? If you see the history of coloniality, that you have, like, actually, this is what maintained the system, because you have those that you create that's going to be outside of this system of belonging to the rights. Always. Democracy was always actually built on that. So we cannot forget. That's why I think it's very important what you said now. And if you go to diversity, like, in necro-capitalism way of thinking how life that matters, life that doesn't matter, if you see that actually diversity is a lot about managing diversity, you know, how you can put in a system that capitalism can profit of. So we have to think in a not naive way of believing that diversity is going to be to diverse, create, of including diverse in this system. So it's really like more, it's a deep way of how you can, as you said, that is, maybe is outside of the system of law and rights that we have it here, that we know here, that we know as a system of a legal system. And actually what you said before about what happened in Brazil was everything about fake news. Bolsonaro just won because, was not because people didn't vote, but was because actually all the hate of the colonial history of Brazil came out, you know, like in this historical moment that we are living now, in a very fascistic way, because actually the hate of class, the racist structure was always there. It was a chance to come out in a way how fake news was spread for saying that actually we have to be afraid of this, of black people taking over the universities, of the LGBT community now is so visible. We have to take over of the situation of this power, like a structure that we maintain for more than 500 years. So, you know, so it's not just a question of, it's about voting, but what the system that we want to have, you know, like the system of democracy that we are fighting for.
Any other question? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we thank you, the four of you, for this this moment that we share. They are still there, so you can approach them, ask your question, and we have a DJ Floria who is going to put some nice music for us, and then we're going to be able to share drinks, and we still have some food for you, and the evening is still going on. Thank you.